"Sir, who did this to you?" a little girl asked the millionaire. But then someone came from behind and did something terrible. Let me know what you thought of this story by giving it a rating from 0 to 10 and comment what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The December heat in Charleston made the asphalt shimmer like water, and little Chloe ran between the cars, stopped at the light on King Street, her small, dirty hands clutching a handful of wilted wildflowers. At 4 years old, she already knew every change of the signal, every driver who usually gave a few coins, every scornful look that ignored her completely. "A flower, sir?" "Just $2, she would murmur in her thin voice, tapping on the window of an imported car. The man inside pretended not to see her, fiddling with his phone in annoyance. Chloe sighed and moved on to the next vehicle, her bare feet burning on the hot pavement. At that very moment, a few blocks away, Arthur Sterling was living the worst moment of his life. Tied with a thick rope to a tree in Hampton Park, a makeshift gag of cloth kept him from screaming for help. His wide eyes searched for any movement among the trees, anyone who could help him. Eleanor had planned everything down to the last detail. After discovering her husband's online gambling through bank statements he had tried to hide, she decided that words would not be enough. She wanted to see him suffer, wanted him to feel real fear before confessing where he had hidden the money from the family. "Business. You're going to stay here until you tell me where every cent you stole is," she had said 2 hours earlier, her eyes shining with a fury Arthur had never seen. "Every dollar you lost on your damn bets." The 58-year-old businessman struggled against the ropes, his dress shirt soaked with sweat. His mind couldn't process how he had gotten there. The bets had started as a distraction during free afternoons at the shipping company's office, just a few dollars on online games. But gradually, the amounts increased, and the feeling of losing had become addictive in a perverse way. Eleanor knew exactly where he was. She had hired 2 men to take him to the park while she arranged the final details of her plan. It wasn't a real kidnapping, she repeated to herself. It was just a necessary lesson for a lying husband. Chloe had finished her round at the traffic light when she decided to cut through the park to get to her grandmother Elsie's house. The girl knew every path, every tree that offered shade on hot days. It was where she used to collect scraps of paper to sell at the junkyard, a job that earned a few coins for dinner. The sun was beginning to set when she heard a strange sound coming from the denser part of the woods. Muffled noises, as if someone was trying to speak with their mouth covered. Chloe stopped, her heart beating faster. Her grandmother always warned her about the dangers of venturing out alone, but childish curiosity won out. Following the sound, she found Arthur tied to the tree, his eyes widening when he saw her. He tried to signal with his head, indicating that she should leave, that she should run and get help. But Chloe approached slowly, as she did with the abandoned kittens she found on the street. "Are you hurt, mister?" she asked, tilting her little head to the side. Arthur nodded, trying to look as non-threatening as possible so as not to scare the girl away. Chloe looked around and saw a shard of green glass, probably from a broken bottle. Without a second thought, she picked up the fragment and began to carefully cut the ropes, binding Arthur's wrists. The man was impressed by the determination of such a small child. Wait, he said softly when he managed to. "Remove the gag. You have to get out of here. It's dangerous." "Why are you tied up, mister?" Chloe asked, continuing her work with the glass, cutting slowly so as not to hurt herself. "It's complicated, little one. Adults sometimes do bad things to each other." When he was finally completely free, Arthur massaged his wrists, bruised by the ropes. He looked at Chloe, who was watching him with big, curious eyes, waiting for an explanation that would make sense to a 4-year-old mind. "What's your name?" he asked, straightening his crumpled shirt. "Chloe. I live with Grandma Elsie." "Chloe." Arthur repeated, finding the name beautiful. You saved me, you know that? The girl smiled shyly. Are you going to be okay now? Arthur felt a strange pang in his chest. How long had it been since someone genuinely cared about him? Eleanor only showed interest when it came to money or controlling his every move. This child, who barely knew him, had risked her own safety to help him. I will be. But now I need to go home, and you should too. Can I go with you, mister? Grandma only gets home late. She works at 3 houses. Arthur hesitated. Taking an unknown child could further complicate his situation with Eleanor. But looking at Chloe, with her simple, patched clothes, her bare, dirty feet, he couldn't just abandon her there. All right. Let's go to a place where you can get something to eat, and then I'll take you to your grandmother. As they walked along the park trail, Arthur had no idea that Eleanor was watching them from a distance, hidden behind a larger tree. She'd come back to check if her husband was still tied up, but now she saw a scene completely different from what she had planned. Who is that girl? She muttered to herself, feeling a new anger grow in her chest. Does Arthur have a secret daughter? Another lie. Eleanor's mind began to weave increasingly elaborate theories about the child. If Arthur had hidden a gambling addiction from her, what other betrayals was he keeping secret? Chloe's presence transformed what was supposed to be a marital lesson into something much more complex and dangerous. Arthur took Chloe to a diner in downtown Charleston, watching how the girl's eyes lit up at the display case full of breads and sweets. It had been a long time since he had paid attention to the small details of life, always absorbed by the company's numbers or the anxiety of online betting. You can choose whatever you want, he said, seeing how Chloe pressed her face against the glass. Really? Anything? She asked, incredulous. The waitress, a middle-aged woman, looked strangely at the unlikely pair. Arthur noticed the judgmental look and felt a pang of irritation. What right did that woman have to judge his relationship with Chloe? A glazed donut and a glass of milk? Chloe asked shyly. Just that? Arthur asked. It's what Grandma always buys for me when she has money. Arthur's heart tightened. He ordered a full meal for the girl and a black coffee for himself. While they waited, Chloe told him about her routine. She woke up early to help Grandma Elsie before she left for her first job, spent the day on the street selling flowers or collecting paper, and at night waited for her grandmother to return from her third job. And your parents? Arthur asked carefully. I don't have any. Grandma says they went to heaven when I was very little. Arthur nodded, not wanting to press. Further, there was something in Chloe's simplicity that calmed him, a purity he had lost long ago amidst financial pressures and a worn-out marriage. When they finished their meal, Arthur asked for Elsie's address. Chloe guided him through the streets to a housing project on the outskirts of the city. The small, terraced houses contrasted sharply with the mansion where Arthur lived with Eleanor. Grandma should be here soon, Chloe said, looking at the clock on a nearby church. A few minutes later, a 72-year-old woman appeared at the end of the street, carrying a heavy bag and walking with difficulty. Elsie had grey hair tied in a simple bun and faded clothes, but her eyes were affectionate when she saw Chloe. Chloe, where have you been, girl? I was worried, Elsie said before noticing Arthur. Her expression immediately changed to a mixture of caution and curiosity. Grandma, this is the mister I helped in the park. He was tied to a tree. Elsie frowned, studying Arthur from head to toe. Her decades of experience as a housekeeper had taught her to read people quickly. Tied up? She asked, suspicious. Arthur felt compelled to explain, but how could he tell the truth about Eleanor without sounding completely insane? It was a family misunderstanding. Chloe helped me, and I wanted to repay her by offering her a meal. Elsie observed Arthur's expensive clothes, his gold watch, his impeccable haircut. There was a deep sadness in his eyes that she recognized immediately. It was the same expression she saw in the mirror every morning. "I appreciate your kindness to the girl," she said finally, "but it's better if you leave. People like us don't mix with people like you." "Grandma, he was nice to me," Chloe protested. "I know, dear, but everyone has their place in the world." Arthur felt rejected, but understood Elsie's protectiveness. Can I come back another day, just to see how you are?" Elsie hesitated. There was something genuine in the man's voice, a vulnerability that went beyond his prosperous appearance. "If you want," she said finally, "but don't bring false hopes to the girl." Arthur waved to Chloe and walked away, but he couldn't get the child's innocent smile and Elsie's harsh but fair words out of his mind. As he drove back home, his phone rang insistently. It was Eleanor. He hesitated before answering, knowing she had found out about his escape from the park. "Where are you?" she asked coldly. "Coming home. And the child?" Arthur almost lost control of the car. "What child?" "Don't play dumb with me, Arthur. I saw you with a girl in the park." "Who is she? Another one of your lies." "Eleanor, it's not what you're thinking. Get home. Now." The call ended, leaving Arthur with a knot in his stomach. Eleanor had become a completely different woman since she discovered his gambling debts. The coldness in her voice promised a devastating argument. Arriving home, a mansion in Charleston's most exclusive neighborhood, Arthur found Eleanor waiting in the living room, sitting in her favorite armchair like a judge about to deliver a sentence. "Sit down," she ordered. Eleanor was a 53-year-old woman, always impeccable in her appearance. Perfectly styled blonde hair, manicured nails, designer clothes. But behind the cultivated beauty was a bitterness that had been growing for years, fueled by the frustration of not being able to get pregnant and the recent discovery of her husband's financial betrayals. "Who is the girl, Arthur? A child who helped me when you had me tied to that tree," he replied, deciding to confront the situation directly. "Don't change the subject. Are you having an affair? A bastard daughter?" "For God's sake, Eleanor, she's 4 years old." "So what? That would mean you cheated on me 5 years ago, right around the time we started trying to have children." Arthur saw in his wife's eyes a pain that went beyond jealousy. Eleanor's infertility had become an open wound between them, a subject she couldn't get over. "She's not my daughter," he said calmly. "She's an orphan girl who lives with her grandmother. She found me tied up and helped me get free, that's all. And you thought it was a good idea to take her out to eat as if she were your responsibility." "She was hungry, Eleanor. It was the least I could do." "The least," she repeated with sarcasm. "You lost $200,000 of our company's money on bets, but you're worried about a stranger." Arthur lowered his head. Eleanor was right about the money. His online bets had started small, but the feeling of always being on the verge of a big win had completely addicted him. With each loss, he bet more, trying to recover what he had lost. "Where is the money, Arthur? What's left of the inheritance your parents left for you to manage?" "I'll get it all back, Eleanor. I just need one more chance." "One more chance?" she shouted, getting up from the armchair. "You've had hundreds of chances, and now you show up with a child, as if that's going to solve our problems. Chloe has nothing to do with our problems." "Chloe?" Eleanor repeated, savoring the name. "What a plain name. Where is she from?" "I don't know. She lives with her grandmother in a housing project." Eleanor walked to the window, observing the perfectly manicured garden of her home. An idea began to form in her mind, a way to use the situation to her advantage. "Tomorrow you're going to the office, and you're bringing me all the company documents. I want to see exactly how much money you lost and how we're going to recover it." "Okay." "And Arthur," she said, turning to face him, "if I find out you're lying about this girl, if there's anything you haven't told me, I'll make your life a living hell. I'll report your tax evasions. I'll tell everyone in town about your gambling addiction, and I'll leave you with nothing." Arthur nodded, knowing Eleanor was capable of carrying out all her threats. But as he went up to his room, he couldn't stop thinking about Chloe and how the girl's eyes had lit up when he offered her the meal. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at him with such pure trust and gratitude. 2 weeks had passed since the encounter in the park, and Arthur couldn't get Chloe out of his thoughts. Every morning as he passed King Street on his way to the office, he slowed down at the traffic light, looking for the girl among the street vendors. Sometimes he would find her, running between the cars with her wilted flowers, and he'd feel a pang of guilt for not stopping. Eleanor had become even more controlling, checking his every move, every call, every expense. She had taken full control of the company's finances, leaving Arthur only with the operational tasks of the shipping business. "I don't trust you anymore," she had said the week before, installing cameras in the office. "Every dollar that comes in or out of this company will go through my approval." That rainy Thursday, Arthur finally made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going straight home after work, he drove to the housing project where Chloe lived. He found the girl sitting alone on the sidewalk, sheltering from the rain under a small awning. "Chloe!" he called, lowering the car window. The girl's eyes lit up when she recognized him. "Mr. Arthur, Grandma said you weren't coming back. Is your grandmother home?" "No, she's at work. She only gets back after 9. Arthur looked up at the sky, heavy with dark clouds. The rain was intensifying, and Chloe had nowhere to go. "Want to go for a ride with me? We can have dinner somewhere, and then I'll bring you back." Chloe hesitated for a moment, remembering her grandmother's warnings about not going with strangers. But Arthur wasn't a stranger. He was the man she had helped, who had been kind to her. "Okay," she said, running to the car. Arthur took her to a simple restaurant in the city center, a place where he wouldn't risk running into Eleanor's acquaintances. As Chloe devoured a plate of spaghetti with tomato sauce, he watched her. Every expression, every innocent smile. "Mr. Arthur, why were you tied to that tree?" she asked suddenly. Arthur almost choked on the water he was drinking. How could he explain the complexity of a failing marriage to a 4-year-old child? "Sometimes adults fight, and they do things they shouldn't do," he said carefully, "like when Grandma gets mad at me and puts me in time out. Something like that. Except with adults, the punishments are different." Chloe nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. Arthur was impressed by the girl's ability to accept simple explanations without questioning too much. "Mister, do you have kids?" The question hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. "No, I don't. Why not? My wife and we tried, but it didn't work out." "Oh," Chloe said, returning to her food. "Did you want to have kids?" "Very much," he admitted, surprised by his own honesty. After dinner, Arthur bought Chloe new clothes at a nearby store. He saw how enchanted she was with a simple yellow dress and a new pair of sandals. It was little money for him, but for Chloe it represented more than she had ever received as a gift in her entire life. "Is Grandma going to be mad?" she asked, looking at herself in the store mirror. "Why would she be mad about new clothes? She always says we can't accept handouts from anyone." "It's not a handout," Arthur said. "It's a gift from a friend." When they returned to the housing project, Elsie was already home, worried about her granddaughter's disappearance. Seeing Chloe get out of Arthur's car, dressed in new clothes, her expression turned into a mixture of relief and irritation. "Chloe, where have you been? I was desperately looking for you." "Grandma, Mr. Arthur took me to dinner, and look at the beautiful clothes he gave me." Elsie looked at Arthur with a stern expression. "I need to talk to you, sir. Chloe, go take a bath." After the girl went inside, Elsie approached Arthur's car. "What do you want with my granddaughter?" "Nothing bad, Miss Elsie. I just want to help. Rich men don't help the poor without wanting something in return. I've been a housekeeper my whole life. I know people like you." Arthur turned off the car and got out, standing face to face with Elsie. "You're right to be suspicious, but I swear my intentions are good." Chloe reminded me of things I had forgotten. What things? What it feels like to have someone genuinely care about me, without interest, without ulterior motives. It's been a long time since I've felt that. Elsie studied Arthur's face, seeing beyond the expensive clothes and the fancy car. There was a deep sadness there, a loneliness she recognized. Do you have a family? I have a wife, but it's complicated. We couldn't have children, and she blames that for all our problems. And do you blame it too? Arthur thought about the question. I don't know what to think about anything anymore. I just know that when I'm with Chloe, I feel useful, like I'm a better person. Elsie sighed. There was something genuine in the man's voice that touched her. My granddaughter has suffered a lot in her life, Mr. Arthur. She lost her parents very young, and I do what I can to take care of her, but I know it's not enough. How did her parents pass? Her mother, Clara, was a very young girl when Chloe was born. She had no family, nothing. I worked for her, took care of the house, and ended up becoming a grandmother to Chloe when she left for where? Elsie hesitated, as if revealing a long-kept secret. I don't know. One night she just disappeared, left the girl with me. I found a note saying it was better this way, that Chloe would be safer with me. And you never tried to look for her? How? I barely knew the girl's last name. Clara never talked about her family, never said who the child's father was. It was as if she was afraid of something. Arthur felt a strange chill. There was something in Clara's story that sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. Miss Elsie, can I keep seeing Chloe? I promise I'll never do anything to hurt her. And your wife? What does she think about this? Arthur looked down. She doesn't know I'm still coming here. Ah, Elsie said, immediately understanding the complexity of the situation. Mr. Arthur, I'll be clear with you. I accept your help because Chloe needs it. But the day I realize you might cause her any suffering, I will push you away forever. Understood? Perfectly understood. And one more thing. If you're going to be a part of her life, I want to know more about you. I don't accept strangers in my granddaughter's life. As Arthur drove back home, his hands trembled on the steering wheel. Not just because he was lying to Eleanor, but because there was something in Clara's story that moved him in a way he didn't understand. The name was vaguely familiar, but from where? When he got home, Eleanor was in the living room, flipping through company documents. She looked up when he entered. You're late, she said coldly. A problem at the company. I had to stay late. What kind of problem? Arthur invented a story about difficulties with suppliers, but he noticed that Eleanor was watching him with an uncomfortable attention. There was something different in her eyes, a suspicion that went beyond the usual distrust. Arthur, she said finally, I hired someone to help us. Help with what? To investigate where the rest of our money is, and also to follow your movements. Arthur's blood ran cold. You hired a private detective? Evan Ross, a specialist in marital cases and financial investigations. He started today. Arthur felt as if the floor had disappeared from under his feet. If Eleanor had hired an investigator, it was only a matter of time before she found out about Chloe, and he had no idea how he would explain it without completely destroying everyone's lives. Evan Ross was a 45-year-old man, thin and observant, with a natural ability to become invisible in crowds. He had worked for 15 years in the police force before opening his own investigation agency, specializing in marital cases and financial fraud. When Eleanor approached him, he figured it would be another typical case of a cheating husband. I want to know everything about my husband, Eleanor had said in his office 3 days ago. Where he goes, who he talks to, what he spends his money on, everything. Now, sitting in his discreet car across the street from Arthur's office, Evan had been observing the businessman's movements for 2 days. What he had discovered so far was intriguing. but not what Eleanor expected to hear. Arthur arrived at work punctually at 8 in the morning, always had lunch at the same nearby restaurant, and on most days left the office at 5 in the afternoon. Exemplary behavior for a husband. But on Tuesdays and Thursdays, something changed. Evan had followed Arthur to the housing project on the outskirts, seeing him meet with a small child and an elderly woman. It didn't look like a romantic encounter, much less an illegal business deal. It looked like a family. That Wednesday, Evan decided to arrive at the housing project earlier. He wanted to observe the child's routine before Arthur's arrival. What he saw surprised him deeply. Chloe was sitting on the sidewalk, arranging small bunches of wildflowers in an old cardboard box. Her clothes were clean but visibly patched, and she hummed softly as she worked. Evan, who had 2 young daughters, felt his heart ache seeing such a young child working alone. At 7 in the morning, an elderly woman left the house carrying a heavy bag. Evan deduced it was the grandmother Arthur had mentioned during a phone conversation he had intercepted. The woman kissed Chloe's forehead, said a few words he couldn't hear, and walked away towards the city centre. Chloe was left alone until 8:30, when she picked up her box of flowers and walked towards the main avenue. Evan followed her discreetly, watching how she positioned herself at the traffic light and tried to sell her flowers to the drivers. Most cars simply ignored the girl. Some honked in irritation when she approached. A few gave some coins, more out of pity than real interest in the wilted flowers. Evan saw how Chloe accepted each rejection without discouragement, always with a shy smile on her face. At 2 in the afternoon, he saw Arthur arriving by car. The businessman stopped far from the traffic light and watched Chloe for a few minutes, clearly fighting some internal impulse. Finally, he made a call. Evan managed to intercept part of the conversation. "Eleanor." "Yes, I'll be late today." "A problem with suppliers." "No, you don't need to wait for me for dinner." Arthur hung up and drove to the traffic light. Chloe ran to his car with eyes shining with joy. The girl's reaction was not that of someone who had known a stranger for a short time. There was familiarity, genuine affection. "Mr. Arthur, I only sold 3 flowers today. Don't worry about that, little one. How about we go get something to eat?" Evan followed them to a simple diner in the city centre. Through the window, he observed the interaction between Arthur and Chloe. The businessman listened attentively to everything the girl said, laughed at her childish stories, and had infinite patience with her questions. There was nothing sexual or inappropriate in Arthur's behavior. In fact, Evan recognized that expression. It was the same one he had when he was with his own daughters. Genuine, paternal love. After the meal, Arthur took Chloe to a pharmacy and bought cough medicine and children's vitamins. "So your grandma doesn't worry when you sneeze," he said, and Chloe laughed as if it were the funniest thing in the world. When they returned to the housing project, Elsie was already home. Evan positioned himself so he could hear part of the conversation. "How was your day, my dear?" Elsie asked, hugging Chloe. "Grandma, Mr. Arthur brought medicine for my cough." "And look," Chloe said, showing a small doll Arthur had bought. "It's just like my mom's doll that you keep." Elsie was visibly moved. "Just like it, my child." "Miss Elsie," Arthur said, "can I talk to you for a moment?" The 2 adults moved away, but Evan managed to catch fragments of the conversation. Arthur was offering money to improve Chloe's living conditions, but Elsie resisted, saying she didn't want charity. "It's not charity," Arthur insisted. It's a way for me to help someone who helped me when I needed it most." "You don't know me well, sir," Elsie said. "You know nothing about this girl's history. Then tell me, I want to understand." Elsie looked at Chloe, who was playing in the yard with the new doll. Her mother, Clara, appeared in my life like a ghost. Too young, pregnant, with nowhere to go. I was working in a big house, and the lady of the house asked me to take care of her until the baby was born. And then Then Clara disappeared. She left the girl with me and vanished. To this day, I don't know if she's alive or if... You never tried to look? With what money? With what resources? I did what I could. I raised Chloe as if she were my own granddaughter. Evan saw Arthur fall silent for a long time, processing the information. There was something in the businessman's expression that suggested the story had touched a deep personal wound. When Arthur finally said goodbye and left, Evan followed him to an evangelical church in the city center. To his surprise, the businessman didn't enter the main sanctuary, but headed to a side room where some kind of discreet meeting was taking place. Evan managed to slip in and discovered it was a support group for gambling addicts. Arthur was sitting in a circle of chairs, listening to other men share their experiences with online betting. "My name is Arthur, and I'm a gambling addict," he said when it was his turn to speak. "I lost $200,000 of my family's company on online bets. My wife found out, and now she controls me like a child. But that's not the worst part." "What's the worst part?" asked an older man leading the meeting. "The worst part is that I met a child who reminded me why it's worth living without gambling. And now I'm afraid my wife will find out and use it against me, against her." The group leader, who introduced himself as Pastor Michael, approached Arthur after the meeting. "Brother, a gambling addiction is a disease that feeds on our loneliness and our escape from reality. It seems you've found a real motivation to heal. But I'm scared. Pastor, my wife hired an investigator to follow me." Evan felt a shiver hearing that. He was there a few feet from Arthur, hearing confessions that completely changed his perception of the case. "Brother Arthur," said Pastor Michael, "sometimes God places special people in our lives precisely when we need motivation to change. This child could be an angel in disguise." When Evan returned to his car, he had a full report to deliver to Eleanor. Arthur didn't have a mistress. He had a cause, an orphan girl who had awakened a dormant paternal instinct in him and a gambling addiction that was destroying his financial life. But as he drove back home, Evan found himself in an ethical dilemma. Delivering this information to Eleanor would mean destroying the only good thing left in Arthur's life, and potentially harming an innocent child who had already suffered enough. For the first time in 15 years of investigations, Evan questioned whether he should report everything he had discovered. Some truths, he was realizing, caused more damage than the lies they replaced. Eleanor was sitting in her living room, drumming her impeccably manicured fingers on the marble table as she waited for Evan's report. She had scheduled the meeting for that Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after hiring the investigator. Her mind had created increasingly elaborate scenarios about Arthur's lies, and she was eager to have her suspicions confirmed. When the doorbell rang, Eleanor checked her appearance in the mirror before opening the door. Even at home, she never relaxed her image of perfection. Evan entered carrying a discreet folder and an expression she couldn't decipher. "Mr. Ross, I hope you have good news for me," she said, indicating the armchair where he should sit. "Mrs. Sterling, I need to be honest with you. From the start, what I discovered about your husband is not exactly what you were expecting to hear." Eleanor's heart quickened. "Does he have a mistress?" "No, Ma'am. There is no woman romantically involved with your husband." "Then what is it? Why does he lie about where he goes? Why does he come home late?" Evan opened the folder and took out some photographs. He showed the first one to Eleanor. It was Arthur talking with Chloe at the diner. "Your husband has been regularly meeting with this child and her grandmother, a 4-year-old orphan girl named Chloe." Eleanor took the photo with trembling hands. "The same child from the park. I knew there was something more. Mrs. Sterling, I have observed all their meetings. There is nothing inappropriate. Your husband treats the girl like a daughter." "Like a daughter?" Eleanor repeated, her voice becoming dangerously low. "He never really wanted to have children with me. He always made excuses, always said it wasn't the right time. Evan realized he had touched a much deeper wound than he had imagined. "Ma'am, Continue," Eleanor ordered. "I want to know everything." Evan reluctantly told her about the regular visits, the gifts, the dinners, the genuine care Arthur showed for Chloe, but he purposefully omitted the information about the support group and the gambling addiction, which was more severe than Eleanor already knew. "And where exactly does this child live?" "In a housing project on the outskirts, with her grandmother who works as a cleaner in 3 different houses." Eleanor stood up and began to walk around the room, processing the information. "How much money does he spend on them?" "Not much. Simple clothes, food, some toys. Maybe $200 a week." $200 a week, Eleanor murmured. $800 a month that he spends on a stranger while telling me we need to save." Evan observed the transformation on Eleanor's face. The coldness that already existed deepened, mixing with a bitterness that seemed to come from years of accumulated disappointments. "Mr. Ross, I want you to continue observing my husband, but now I also want you to investigate this child and this grandmother. I want to know everything about them, where they came from, how they met Arthur, everything." "Ma'am, may I ask why? The child is innocent." "Innocent?" Eleanor laughed without humor. "No female is innocent, Mr. Ross, not even the little ones. They learn early how to manipulate needy men." Evan felt a deep discomfort with the turn the conversation was taking. "Mrs. Sterling, the girl is only 4 years old. So what? At 4, I already knew how to get my father to give me what I wanted. Women are born knowing how to use men." At that moment, Evan made a decision that would change the course of the entire investigation. He wouldn't tell Eleanor everything. There was something dangerous in the way she looked at the photos of Chloe, a coldness that deeply worried him. "I will investigate the child's family," he said, "but it may take some time." "I have time," Eleanor replied. "And Mr. Ross, this time I want you to be truly discreet. I don't want my husband to suspect we're investigating." After Evan left, Eleanor was left alone with the photographs scattered on the table. She picked one up, Arthur smiling genuinely as Chloe showed him a flower, and felt a rage that burned like acid. For 5 years she had tried to get pregnant. 5 years of fertility treatments, hormones, frustrated expectations. 5 years of hearing doctors say the problem wasn't just hers, that Arthur also had fertility issues that made conception difficult, and now she discovered he was playing father with an unknown child, giving the paternal love he had always denied her, offering the affection she had always begged him to show when they talked about having children. Eleanor picked up the phone and called her only true friend, Sandra, an equally bitter woman who had gone through a traumatic divorce 2 years earlier. "Sandra, I need to talk to you. Can you come over now?" An hour later, Sandra was sitting in the same armchair Evan had, occupied, listening to Eleanor recount the discoveries about Arthur. "Let me get this straight," Sandra said, examining the photos. "Your husband loses money gambling, lies to you about where he goes, and is now playing daddy to a street kid?" "Exactly. Eleanor, this is humiliating. He's cheating on you with a whole family." "It's not sexual cheating," Eleanor corrected. "It's worse," Sandra said. "It's emotional betrayal. He's giving them what he should be giving you, the affection, the attention, the care." Eleanor felt Sandra's words confirm her worst fears. "What would you do in my place?" "I'd end it. Before it gets worse. This child is competing with you for your husband's attention, and if you lose, you'll lose him forever." "But how? I can't just forbid Arthur from seeing her." "Yes, you can," Sandra said with a cruel smile. "You're his wife. You have rights. And most importantly, you control the company's money. Use that to your advantage." That night, when Arthur came home, He found Eleanor waiting in the living room with a pile of documents on the table. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" "About your priorities. Sit down." Arthur sat on the sofa, noticing the tension in the air. "Eleanor, if it's about money, it's not just about money. It's about loyalty. It's about what it means to be married." Eleanor picked up one of the photos Evan had taken and placed it in front of Arthur. The expression on his face changed completely. Surprise, fear, and guilt mixed in a look that confirmed all of Eleanor's suspicions. "You hired someone to spy on me," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "I hired someone to find out the truth. And the truth is that my husband is spending our company's money on a family of strangers. Eleanor, I can explain. You don't need to explain anything. I understand perfectly. You found a needy child and decided to play the father you never wanted to be with me. That's not it." "That's exactly it," Eleanor shouted, standing up. 5 years, Arthur. 5 years I tried to have a child with you, and you always found an excuse, always said you weren't ready." Arthur lowered his head. He knew Eleanor was partly right. His relationship with Chloe had awakened a paternal instinct he had always denied existed. "Now you're going to choose," Eleanor continued. "Either you cut off all and any relationship with this child, or I will make your life a living hell. I'll report your tax evasions, I'll spread it all over town that you're a gambling addict, and I'll leave you in misery. Eleanor, please." "No," she said, with a firmness that chilled Arthur's blood. "There's no negotiation. You have until Monday to decide, either your real family or this pathetic fantasy with a street kid." Arthur looked at the photo of Chloe smiling at him and felt his world crumble once more. No matter which choice he made, someone he loved would get hurt. And for the first time since he had met Chloe, he questioned if it would have been better never to have found her at all. The weekend passed like an eternity for Arthur. He was locked in the house, watching Eleanor circle the mansion like a satisfied predator with its cornered prey. Every glance from her was a reminder of the ultimatum he had received, every silence filled with unspoken threats. On Monday morning, Arthur woke up with a pain in his chest that had nothing to do with heart problems. It was the pain of knowing he would have to abandon Chloe, the only person who made him feel human again. "Have you decided?" Eleanor asked during breakfast, her voice too sweet to be genuine. "Yes," Arthur lied, unable to look his wife in the eye. "Good. I want you to call her today and explain that you can't see her anymore." "Who?" "The child's grandmother. End this once and for all." Arthur nodded, but inside a rebellion was growing. How could Eleanor be so cold towards an innocent child? How could she turn an act of kindness into something so dirty and wrong? At the office, Arthur tried to focus on work, but he couldn't stop thinking about Chloe. It was Monday, which meant she would be at the traffic light in the afternoon, waiting for him with that smile that lit up his day. At 2 in the afternoon, his phone rang. It was Evan. "Mr. Sterling, can I meet you? I need to talk to you urgently." "About what?" "About your family situation. I think I can help." Arthur hesitated. Talking to the investigator hired by Eleanor seemed like a betrayal, but also an opportunity. "I'll meet you at the Central Cafe in 20 minutes. When Arthur arrived at the cafe, Evan was already waiting at a table in the back, away from prying ears. The investigator seemed nervous, constantly fidgeting with a cup of cold coffee. "Mr. Sterling, I'll be direct. Your wife hired me to investigate your activities, but after observing your relationship with Chloe, I can no longer work against you." "What do you mean?" "I have 2 young daughters. I recognize genuine paternal love when I see it. What you feel for that child is real, and your wife wants to destroy it." Arthur leaned back in his chair. "And what do you propose? That we work together? Eleanor asked me to investigate the past of Chloe and her grandmother. If I find something that can protect you, I'll share it with you first." "Why would you do that?" Because some truths are more important than money, Evan said. And because this child doesn't deserve to be used as a pawn in a marital power game. At that very moment, Eleanor was having a very different meeting. She had scheduled lunch with Gerard Morgan, her 84-year-old father, at Charleston's most expensive restaurant. Gerard was an imposing man, even in his advanced age, with perfectly combed white hair and custom-made clothes. He had been a minority partner in Arthur's family shipping company decades ago, before selling his share and focusing on other investments. "Daddy, I need your help," Eleanor said, after they ordered their food. "With what, my dear?" "Arthur is getting involved with inappropriate people, a street child and her family." Gerard frowned. "What kind of involvement? He's playing father to this child, spending company money, lying to me, neglecting our marriage, and what do you want me to do?" Eleanor leaned closer to her father. "You know everyone in this city. You have influence. I need you to find out who these people are and how I can get them away from Arthur for good." Gerard took a sip of wine before answering. There was something in his daughter's request that bothered him, a coldness he recognized from less noble moments in his own life. "Eleanor, maybe Arthur is just trying to do a good deed. Daddy, he never wanted to have children with me. 5 years of trying, and now I find out he has paternal instincts but for a stranger." "Ah," Gerard said, finally understanding the real wound behind his daughter's anger. "So that's what this is about. It's about loyalty. It's about what he owes me as a husband." Gerard was silent for a long moment. Decades ago, he had made similar choices, prioritizing control and power over compassion. Some of those choices still haunted him on sleepless nights. "All right," he said finally. "I'll use my contacts to find out about this family. But Eleanor..." "Yes? Be sure this is what you really want. Some victories cost more than they're worth." Meanwhile, Chloe had been at the traffic light for 2 hours, waiting for Arthur. Her flowers were already wilted from the heat of the sun, but she kept looking at every passing car, hoping to recognize the kind face of the man who had become so important in her small life. Elsie had noticed her granddaughter's growing anxiety during the week. Chloe constantly asked when Arthur would return, if he had forgotten her, if she had done something wrong to push him away. "Grandma, do you think Mr. Arthur doesn't like me anymore?" Chloe asked that night as they ate a simple vegetable soup. "Why do you think that, my dear? He always came. On Mondays and Thursdays. Today is Monday, and he didn't come." Elsie's heart ached. She had allowed herself to believe that Arthur was different, but maybe he was just another rich man playing at kindness until he got tired. "Sometimes adults get busy with important things," she said, trying to protect Chloe from disappointment. "More important than me?" Chloe's innocent question cut Elsie like a blade. The girl had already been abandoned once by her mother, and now she was being abandoned again by someone she had trusted. "Chloe, look at me," Elsie said, holding the girl's small face. "No matter who comes or goes in our lives, I will always be here. Always. You promise, Grandma. I promise with all my heart." That night, after Chloe fell asleep, Elsie sat in the small kitchen, drinking tea and thinking about secrets she had kept for years. Secrets about Clara, about how Chloe's mother had really disappeared, about truths that it might be time to reveal. She got up and went to her room, opening an old drawer where she kept the few memories she had of Clara. At the bottom of the drawer, wrapped in a faded cloth, was a rag doll that Clara had made for Chloe when she was still a baby. But along with the doll, there was something Elsie had never mentioned to anyone. A simple gold ring that Clara always wore and which she had left behind when she disappeared. A ring that had an almost imperceptible inscription on the inside. Elsie took an old magnifying glass and read again the inscription she had discovered years ago. "C, forever yours, A.S." The initials had always intrigued her. C was obviously Clara, but who could A.S. be? And why had Clara left behind something that clearly had sentimental value? For the first time in 4 years, Elsie wondered if it wasn't time to investigate Clara's past. Not out of curiosity, but for Chloe. If Arthur had really given up on them, maybe it was time to find out if there were other people in her life who could take care of the girl if something happened to her. Elsie put the ring back in the drawer, but her mind was already working. Tomorrow she would start asking questions. Questions that might reveal connections no one expected to find. Evan had spent 3 days discreetly investigating Clara's past, and what he discovered left him deeply disturbed. Through old contacts in the police force and careful conversations with older residents of the city, he managed to piece together part of the story that Elsie never fully knew. Clara Santos had worked as a waitress at the Primavera Cafe, an establishment that belonged to Arthur's family between 2018 and 2019. She was young, beautiful, and according to reports, extremely dedicated to her work. But her abrupt departure had left a mark on the memory of old employees. She disappeared overnight, said Mrs. Peterson, a cook who still worked. At the cafe, she was pregnant, poor thing, big belly already showing. One day she was here, the next she was gone. Did she say anything about leaving? Evan asked. Not to me, but I remember that in her last week here she was scared, always looking over her shoulder as if someone was following her. Evan felt a chill. Scared of what? I don't know, but there was a bad argument here at the cafe a few days before she disappeared, between her and Mr. Gerard. Gerard Morgan, Eleanor's father, the very same. He was a minority partner at the time, came here often to inspect things. That day, he called Clara for a private conversation, and she came out crying. Evan thanked her for the information and left the cafe with more questions than answers. The connection between Gerard and Clara opened up disturbing possibilities he didn't want to consider. That same day, Elsie had mustered the courage to seek information about Clara's ring. She took the piece to an old jewelry store in downtown Charleston, where the owner, Mr. Vincent, knew the history of almost every important family in the city. This ring is interesting, Mr. Vincent said, examining the piece with a loupe. Good quality gold, and this inscription, A.S. Could it be Arthur Sterling? Elsie's heart stopped. How do you know that name? A traditional family from around here, owners of the shipping company and the Primavera Cafe. Young Arthur married Gerard Morgan's daughter a few years ago. Do you know them personally? I know of them. Why do you ask? Elsie hesitated but decided to take a chance. This piece belonged to my granddaughter's mother. She might have known this family. Mr. Vincent observed her with renewed curiosity. Do you want my opinion? This ring isn't just a common gift. It's custom work, made to order. Whoever gave this to your friend truly loved her. Meanwhile, Arthur was living the 3rd day of the worst dilemma of his life. He had promised Eleanor he would cut ties with Chloe, but he couldn't get the girl's little face waiting for him at the traffic light out of his mind. At night, he lay awake imagining how he would explain his disappearance to a 4-year-old. On Thursday, his resistance finally broke. Instead of going home after work, Arthur drove to the housing project. He found Chloe sitting on the sidewalk, playing alone with colored pebbles she had collected. "Mr. Arthur," she shouted, running to hug him, "I thought you had forgotten about me." Chloe's pure joy broke Arthur's heart. How could Eleanor want to destroy something so innocent and beautiful? "I would never forget you, little one. I've just been very busy. Grandma said adults get busy sometimes, but I missed you." Arthur knelt to the girl's height. "Chloe, I need to talk to you about something important. What is it?" He looked into the child's trusting eyes and couldn't continue. How could he explain that his wife had forced him to choose between his marriage and his friendship with her? "Actually, it doesn't matter now," he said. "How about we go get something to eat?" During dinner at a nearby diner, Chloe excitedly told him about her week, about the flowers she had sold, about a kitten she had found in the yard. Arthur listened with full attention, engraving every word in his memory. It was when they were returning to the housing project that Arthur's world collapsed again. Eleanor was waiting by her car, parked in front of Elsie's house like an avenging angel. "Eleanor," Arthur muttered, feeling his blood run cold. "What are you doing here?" "I came to get my husband," she said coldly, completely ignoring Chloe. "It seems you forgot our agreement." Elsie came out of the house upon hearing loud voices in the street. When she saw the elegant and hostile woman standing in front of her house, she immediately understood who it was. "So this is the wife," Elsie said, positioning herself protectively in front of Chloe. "And this is the gold digger who is manipulating my husband," Eleanor retorted. "Eleanor, please," Arthur pleaded. "Not in front of the child." "Oh, now you care about the child. What about me? Don't you care about me?" Chloe hid behind Elsie, frightened by the loud, angry voice of the unknown woman. "Grandma? Who is she?" "No one important, my dear. Let's go inside." "No one important?" Eleanor repeated, her voice rising an octave. "I am his wife. I'm the one who supports the good life he has." "Eleanor, let's go," Arthur said, trying to pull her by the arm. "No," she shouted, freeing herself. "I want everyone here to know who Arthur Sterling really is. He's a gambling addict who lost $200,000 of our company. A liar who prefers to play daddy with strangers than to take responsibility for his own wife." The silence that followed was broken only by Chloe's soft crying. The girl didn't understand all the words, but she perfectly understood the anger and malice in Eleanor's voice. Elsie knelt and hugged Chloe, whispering words of comfort in her ear. Then she stood up and faced Eleanor with a dignity that made the woman take a step back. "Mom, I don't know what kind of problems you have with your husband, but don't come taking it out on an innocent child." "Innocent?" Eleanor laughed. "Your granddaughter is a manipulator. She managed to bewitch my husband with this act of a helpless orphan." "My granddaughter is 4 years old," Elsie said, her voice becoming dangerously low. "If your husband finds comfort with her for his problems, maybe you should ask yourself why." Eleanor was speechless for a moment, but quickly regained her fury. "Arthur, you see? This woman is turning you against me, manipulating you to steal our money." It was at that moment that a familiar voice interrupted the argument. "What's going on here?" Everyone turned to see Gerard Morgan getting out of a black car with tinted windows, accompanied by a younger man in a suit. "Daddy," Eleanor said, clearly surprised. "What are you doing here?" Gerard didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on Elsie with an expression that mixed surprise and something that looked like fear. "Miss Elsie," he said hesitantly, "is that really you?" Elsie frowned. "Do we know each other? You worked for the Montenegro family some years ago. You took care of a pregnant young woman." The recognition hit Elsie like a lightning bolt. Mr. Gerard, Clara's boss, Chloe, looked up upon hearing her mother's name. "Grandma, did he know my mum?" Gerard looked at the small girl, and his face visibly paled. There was something in Chloe's eyes, something familiar that made him take a step back. "My God," he muttered. "Is she Clara's daughter?" "She is," Elsie confirmed, not knowing why she felt a growing fear. "Why do you ask?" Eleanor looked confused between her father and Elsie. "Daddy, what are you talking about? Who is Clara?" Gerard remained silent for a long moment, clearly struggling with some internal decision. Finally, he looked at Arthur. "Son, do you know who this child is?" "It's Chloe," Arthur replied, "the girl who helped me in the park." "No," Gerard said, his voice trembling. "She is much more than that. She is the daughter of the woman I forced to leave this city 4 years ago." The silence that followed was absolute. Eleanor looked at her father as if he had spoken in a foreign language. Arthur felt as if the ground had disappeared from under his feet, and Elsie hugged Chloe tighter, realizing that secrets buried for years were finally coming to light. Gerard's confession fell upon the small group like a silent bomb. Eleanor was the first to break the silence, her voice coming out as an incredulous whisper. "Daddy, what do you mean by forced to leave the city?" Gerard looked around, realizing there were too many spectators for such a delicate conversation. Several windows in the housing project were open, curious neighbors trying to hear what was happening. "We can't discuss this here on the street," he said. "Miss Elsie, may I come into your house? There are things I need to explain, things I should have explained a long time ago." Elsie hesitated, looking at Chloe, who was still frightened by the commotion. "Chloe, my dear, go to your room and play with your drawings. The adults need to talk." "But Grandma, they're talking about my mom," the girl protested. "I know, love. I'll tell you everything later, okay?" Reluctantly, Chloe obeyed but stood behind the bedroom door, trying to listen to the adults' conversation. In the small living room of Elsie's house, Gerard sat heavily in an old chair, as if carrying the weight of all his years. Arthur and Eleanor sat on the sofa, while Elsie remained standing, clearly uncomfortable with the intrusion. "Gentlemen, this is my home and I want clear answers," Elsie said. "What did you do to Clara?" Gerard took a deep breath before starting. In 2019, Clara worked at the Primavera Cafe. She was a special girl, dedicated, honest. But she was pregnant and single in a small city where that still caused a scandal. "So what?" Eleanor asked impatiently. "So I was expanding the business at the time. There were important investors interested in buying my share of the company. Conservative investors who valued the moral reputation of their partners." Arthur began to understand where the story was going. "You thought a pregnant single employee would harm the business." "Not just that," Gerard continued, avoiding looking at Elsie. "There were rumors about who the father of the child might be, rumors that could tarnish the Sterling family's reputation." "What rumors?" Eleanor asked. Gerard was silent for a long moment. Some employees suspected the father might be someone from the owner's family. Arthur stood up abruptly. "Are you insinuating that I—" "No," Gerard said quickly. "Not you, but your younger cousin, Robert, who worked at the cafe at the time. He and Clara were close, very close." Elsie's legs felt weak and she leaned against the wall. "Robert Sterling is Chloe's father." "We don't know for sure," Gerard admitted. Clara never confirmed or denied it. But Robert had just married the daughter of a traditional family from Atlanta. A scandal would destroy not only his marriage, but also the family's business. "So what did you do?" Arthur asked, his voice filled with disgust. "I offered Clara money to leave the city. A lot of money. Enough for her to start a new life elsewhere and raise the child with dignity. But she refused," Elsie said, remembering Clara's last weeks in her home. "She refused several times, said Charleston was the only home she knew, that she had nowhere to go. So I used other methods of persuasion." Eleanor looked at her father with growing horror. "What methods?" "I told her that if she didn't accept the money and leave voluntarily, I would make sure she lost her job anywhere in the city. That I would tell everyone about her pregnancy. That I would turn her into a scandal. In a small city like Charleston, that would mean complete social ostracism." Elsie covered her face with her hands. "That's why she was so scared in her last weeks. That's why she cried every night. I regretted it almost immediately," Gerard continued, his voice breaking. "But when I tried to go back on it, Clara had already disappeared. She left the child with you and vanished." "With the money you offered?" Elsie asked. "No, she never accepted a cent. The money sat in a bank account for years waiting for her." Arthur was processing the revelations with growing outrage. "You destroyed an innocent woman's life to protect rumors about my cousin." Robert denied any involvement with Clara, Gerard said defensively. "But I couldn't risk it." "And where is Robert now?" Eleanor asked. "He died in a car accident 2 years ago, in Atlanta." The silence that followed was heavy. Chloe had lost any chance of knowing her possible father. And Clara had suffered for rumors that might not even have been true. "There's something else," Gerard said hesitantly. "After Clara disappeared, I hired an investigator to try to find her. I wanted to apologize, to return the money that was rightfully hers. The investigator located her 2 years ago. Everyone turned to him with full attention. Is she alive?" Elsie whispered. "She was at the time living in Somerville, working in a boarding house under a false name. But when the investigator tried to approach her, she panicked. She fled the same day." "Why didn't you tell us this before?" Arthur asked. "Because I was afraid. Afraid that if she came back, the whole truth would come out. Afraid that my family would discover what I had done." Eleanor looked at her father as if she were seeing him for the first time. "Daddy, you destroyed an entire family because of what other people might think." "I was younger, more ambitious. I thought reputation was more important than compassion." At that moment, Chloe appeared in the room, no longer able to pretend she was in her bedroom. There were tears in her eyes, but also a determination that surprised all the adults. "Is my mom alive?" she asked, her small voice firm. Gerard looked at the girl he had indirectly orphaned and felt the full weight of his past actions. "She might be, little one. We don't know for sure. I want to look for her." "Chloe," Elsie said gently, "she might not want to be found, but I want to try. I want her to know that I grew up well, that Grandma took care of me, that I'm not mad at her for leaving." Arthur knelt in front of Chloe. "If you want to look for your mother, I will help. We will use all necessary resources to find her." "Arthur," Eleanor said in a warning tone, "think about what you're promising." "I am thinking," he replied, looking directly into his wife's eyes. "I'm thinking that this child deserves to know the truth about her family, and that we, all of us, owe her at least that much." Gerard stood up slowly. "If you are willing to look for Clara, I will finance the search. It's the least I can do to try to repair the damage I caused." "We don't want your money," Elsie said with dignity. "Please," Gerard begged, "let me try to fix what I broke. Let me use my resources for something good, for a change." At that moment, Gerard's phone rang. It was Evan, who had been investigating discreetly and now had urgent information. "Mr. Morgan, I found Clara. She's admitted to the regional hospital in Somerville. She was in an accident and is in serious condition." The silence that followed was absolute. After years of searching, after so many painful revelations, Clara was just an hour away, fighting for her life in a hospital. "Let's go," Arthur said, already getting up. "All of us. Chloe has the right to see her mother." "What if it's too late?" Elsie asked, hugging Chloe. "Then at least she will know we tried," Arthur replied, determined not to fail Chloe again. As they prepared to travel to Somerville, none of them imagined that the biggest revelation was yet to come. The journey to Somerville was made in 2 cars, in a silence filled with tension and expectations. Chloe was in Arthur's car with Elsie, while Eleanor reluctantly accompanied her father in his vehicle. The girl spent most of the journey with her face pressed against the window, watching the passing landscape, not fully understanding what was happening. "Grandma, will my mum remember me?" she asked when they were arriving at the hospital. Elsie held her granddaughter's small hand, trying to convey a confidence she herself did not feel. "Of course she will, my dear. A mother never forgets her children." Somerville Regional Hospital was a simple, busy building with long corridors that smelled of disinfectant and a heavy atmosphere of suffering and hope. Evan was waiting for them at the reception, a grim expression on his face. "How is she?" Gerard asked as soon as they arrived. "Stable, but critical," Evan replied. "She was hit by a car 3 days ago, head trauma and several fractures. The doctors say she was unconscious for 48 hours. "Is she awake now?" Arthur asked. "She is, but confused. She doesn't remember much, not even her real name. She's registered as Solange Nunez, the false name she's been using all these years. Elsie knelt in front of Chloe. My dear, your mother is very hurt. She may not look like the mother you remember. She may not recognize you immediately. It's okay, Grandma. I just want to see her. A doctor approached the group, noticing the tension in the air. Are you family of the patient in room 204? We are, Gerard said, taking the lead. This is her daughter, he indicated Chloe. The doctor, Dr. Henrique, observed the girl attentively. The patient has been suffering from partial amnesia since the accident. She remembers fragments of the past, but can't connect the memories. The daughter's presence might help, or it might cause more confusion. We understand the risks, Arthur said, but the girl has the right to see her mother. They were led to the room on the 3rd floor. Clara was lying in a narrow bed, with bandages on her head and one arm in a cast. At 26, she looked older, marked by years of hard work and the stress of living with a false identity. When Chloe entered the room, Clara turned her head slowly. Her eyes, still swollen from the accident, widened at the sight of the small girl. Who are you? Clara asked, her voice weak and confused. I'm Chloe, the girl replied shyly. Your daughter. Clara frowned, clearly struggling to process the information. My daughter? I don't remember having a daughter. Elsie approached the bed. Clara, it's me, Elsie, remember me. I took care of you when you were pregnant. I took care of Chloe when you had to leave. Elsie, Clara repeated slowly. That name sounds familiar, but everything is so confusing. Dr. Henrique explained to the group that the traumatic amnesia could be temporary or permanent, depending on the extent of the brain damage. Sometimes familiar stimuli help recover lost memories, but don't force it. Let it happen naturally. Chloe moved closer to the bed and, with the innocence of a child, took Clara's uninjured hand. Mom, I grew up well. Grandma Elsie took good care of me. I learned to draw, to sell flowers, to sing the song you used to sing to me. What song? Clara asked, interested. Chloe began to hum a simple lullaby, a sweet melody about little birds flying free in the sky. As the girl sang, something changed in Clara's expression. Tears began to stream down her bruised face. I know this song, she whispered. I used to sing to someone small. To me, Mom. You used to sing it to me before I went to sleep. Clara looked more closely at Chloe, as if trying to fit pieces of a puzzle together. You have my eyes, she said finally, and your hair. It's just like mine when I was a child. Gerard, who had remained silent at the back of the room, approached slowly. Clara, there's something I need to tell you. Something about why you left Charleston. Clara turned, her face towards the voice, and when she recognized Gerard, her eyes filled with fear. I know you. You said bad things to me. You said I had to leave. Yes, Gerard admitted, lowering his head, and I have regretted it every day since. Why? Clara asked, her voice growing stronger. Why did you force me to leave my daughter? For fear, for pride, for prioritizing business over people. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Eleanor, who had remained quiet, finally spoke up. Clara, my father was wrong. We were all wrong. You should never have been forced to leave. Clara looked at Eleanor with confusion. Who are you? I'm his daughter, and I'm married to Arthur, Eleanor said, indicating the businessman. Arthur, Clara repeated, looking at him. That name also sounds familiar. You worked at my family's cafe, Arthur explained gently. You were an excellent employee, always dedicated, always kind. Gradually, memories began to return to Clara in disconnected fragments. She remembered the cafe, the regular customers, the fear she felt in the last weeks before leaving. She remembered the ring she had left behind, the desperate plan to start a new life in another city. I left my daughter to protect her, she said, looking at Chloe. I thought it would be better for her to grow up without the weight of my problems. But I wanted to be with you, Mom, Chloe said, tears streaming down her face. Every day I wished you would come back. Clara tried to sit up in bed, ignoring the pain. My little one, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for abandoning you. You didn't abandon her, Elsie interrupted. You left her with someone who could care for her. It was an act of love, not abandonment. At that moment, a nurse entered the room to check Clara's vital signs. She noticed the patient's agitation and the number of visitors. I'm sorry, but the patient needs to rest. You can come back tomorrow. Please, Chloe begged. I just found my mother. The nurse looked at the girl and then at Clara, seeing how the patient held tightly to the child's hand. 15 minutes, she said finally, but no agitation. Dr. Henrique approached the group. There's something else you need to know. During the exams, we discovered that the patient is pregnant, about 2 months along. The silence that followed was absolute. Clara looked at the doctor in total shock. Pregnant? That's impossible. The tests are conclusive, the doctor said gently. You didn't know. Clara shook her head, clearly confused and scared. I don't remember. It can't be. Elsie felt the world spin around her. First, she found Clara after 4 years, discovered she was alive but injured, and now there was a new child on the way. Who's the father? Gerard asked. I don't know, Clara admitted, tears returning to her eyes. I don't remember anything from the last few months. Nothing at all. Chloe, who didn't fully understand what the news of the pregnancy meant, just squeezed her mother's hand tighter. Mum, are you going to be okay? I'll try, my dear, Clara said. Now that I know you exist, that you've grown up well, I'll try to be okay for you. When they finally had to leave the hospital, Gerard gathered the group in the parking lot. Clara will need specialized medical care, especially because of the high-risk pregnancy after the trauma. I'll arrange for her transfer to a private hospital in Charleston. And then? Elsie asked. Where will she live? How will she support 2 children? We'll figure that out together, Arthur said. Clara is part of my family's story now. I won't abandon her again. Eleanor looked at her husband with an unreadable expression. The discovery of Clara's pregnancy had changed everything once again, complicating an already impossible situation. As they returned to Charleston, none of them imagined that the biggest surprise was yet to come, and that the paternity of the new child would reveal connections no one had ever considered possible. A week had passed since the reunion at the hospital, and Clara was transferred to a private clinic in Charleston, where she received specialized care for both her recovery from the accident and the monitoring of her pregnancy. Her memory was gradually returning, but there were still significant gaps about the last few months. Chloe visited her mother every day after selling her flowers at the traffic light. Arthur had tried to convince her to stop working, offering full support, but Elsie refused to accept more charity than was absolutely necessary for Clara's medical care. I have my pride, Elsie had said. I accept help to save her life, but we will not become dependent. That Thursday morning, Eleanor surprised everyone by showing up at the clinic alone, carrying a bouquet of flowers and an expression no one could decipher. She found Clara sitting in a comfortable armchair, reading a children's book that Chloe had asked to leave there. "May I come in?" Eleanor asked. Clara looked up, still wary of Arthur's wife. "Of course, make yourself comfortable." Eleanor sat in a nearby chair, clearly uncomfortable. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The headaches have decreased and I'm remembering more things every day. And the baby. The doctors say everything is fine. Luckily, the accident didn't affect the pregnancy." Eleanor was silent for a moment, observing Clara's still small belly. "Do you really not remember who the father is?" "Only fragments. I remember working at the boarding house, meeting a kind man who frequented the place. He was affectionate, made me laugh, but I can't see his face clearly. What did he look like? Clara closed her eyes, forcing her memory. Tall, dark hair starting to go grey at the temples. He had a small scar on his right hand, as if he had cut himself with some tool. He spoke with a country accent. He wasn't from Somerville. Eleanor's heart pounded. The description sounded all too familiar. Did he say what his job was? Something related to construction or remodeling houses. He always smelled of paint or varnish. "Clara," Eleanor said, her voice trembling, "I need to show you something." She took her phone from her purse and looked for a photo. It was an image of Arthur in his office, looking at some papers. In the photo, a scar on his right hand was clearly visible, exactly as Clara had described. "Is it him?" Eleanor asked, showing the screen. Clara looked closely at the photo, and gradually her expression changed from confusion to recognition and then to horror. "My God," she whispered, it's Arthur." "But that's impossible. He was never in Somerville. He never looked for me." "Or you didn't know it was him," Eleanor said, a mixture of anger and sadness in her voice. "My husband travels a lot for business. He supervises construction projects, remodels commercial establishments. He might have been in Somerville in recent months." Clara covered her face with her hands. "It can't be. He's married to you." "Why would he be with me?" "Because our marriage has been in tatters for years," Eleanor admitted. "Because he lost money gambling, because we couldn't have children, because we've become strangers living in the same house. But he takes care of Chloe as if she were his daughter. Why would he do that if she were really his daughter?" Eleanor completed. "Maybe that's why. Maybe he always knew." At that moment, Arthur entered the room carrying fresh fruit for Clara. He stopped abruptly when he saw Eleanor there, and the tension in the air was immediate. "Eleanor, what are you doing here?" "Discovering truths," she replied, standing up. "Clara, can you repeat to my husband the description of your baby's father?" Clara looked between the two, realizing she was in the middle of something much more complex than she had imagined. "Arthur, I need to ask you something. Were you in Somerville in recent months, staying at a boarding house on Main Street?" Arthur paled. "Clara, Answer," Eleanor demanded. "Were you or were you not?" "I was," he finally admitted. "In October, November, and December. I was remodeling a coffee shop franchise we bought there. I stayed at Mrs. Marlene's boarding house, the same boarding house where I worked," Clara said, tears beginning to stream down her face. "Did you know who she was?" Eleanor asked. Arthur sat heavily in a chair. "Not immediately. She was using a different name. She looked different. I only started to suspect when she hummed the same song Chloe sings." "And still you said nothing? To her, to me, to anyone?" I was confused. Clara clearly didn't want to be found. She was living a new life, seemed happy. I thought it would be selfish of me to disturb that. Clara stood up abruptly, ignoring the dizziness she still sometimes felt. "You lied to me. You let me fall in love with you without telling me you knew who I was." "I didn't lie about my feelings," Arthur said desperately. "Everything I felt for you was real. You made me remember what it was like to be happy." "But you were married," Clara shouted. "You had a wife. You had responsibilities." "A marriage that was already dead," he retorted. "Eleanor and I haven't touched each other in years. We don't talk about anything but money and problems." "That didn't give you the right to use me," Clara said, her tears turning to anger. "Nor to let me get pregnant without knowing the truth." Eleanor watched the argument with a strange expression. There was anger, yes, but also something that seemed to be relief. "Arthur," she said finally, "during all these years, did you ever truly love me?" The question caught Arthur off guard. "Eleanor, of course I—" "Don't lie anymore," she interrupted. "Not to me, not to her, not to yourself. Did you ever love me?" Arthur was silent for a long moment, struggling with a truth he had denied for years. "In the beginning, yes. But then Then we became so focused on having children, on keeping up appearances, that we forgot how to love. And do you love Clara? Yes, he admitted without hesitation. I love her, and I love Chloe. They made me remember who I really am. Clara shook her head, still trying to process all the revelations. And now? What do we do with all this? I have a daughter I finally found again. I'm pregnant by a married man, and I've discovered I was deceived again. Now, Eleanor said, surprisingly calm, we face the truth, all of us. She headed for the door but stopped before leaving. Clara, you weren't the only one deceived. I spent years trying to save a marriage with a man who was never truly mine. Maybe it's time for all of us to stop pretending. After Eleanor left, Arthur and Clara were left alone in the room, the weight of their confessions hanging between them. Does Chloe know? Clara finally asked. Does she suspect you might be her father? No. She just knows you take care of her with affection. Arthur, I need to know the truth. Do you believe you're Chloe's father? He looked her in the eyes. I don't know. But I know I love her as if she were my daughter. And I know I want to be present in the lives of both children you carry, both Chloe and the baby to come. Clara sat down again, exhausted by the emotional toll of the day. All of this is so confusing. I need time to understand what I feel. You have all the time in the world, Arthur promised. I won't pressure you, but I also won't abandon you again. That night, Eleanor was alone in her mansion when she received an unexpected visit. It was Evan, with documents he had discovered during his investigations into Clara's family. Mrs. Sterling, he said, there's something you need to know about Chloe's paternity, something that could change everything again. Eleanor watched Evan enter her living room with a thick folder of documents, his serious expression indicating that the news would not be simple. The investigator had spent days researching old files, hospital records, and certificates that could finally clarify the issue of Chloe's paternity. Mr. Ross, I hope you found definitive answers, Eleanor said, indicating the armchair where he should sit. I have, ma'am, but they are not the answers any of us expected. Evan opened the folder and took out a birth certificate, yellowed with time. This is Chloe's original birth certificate, which I obtained through contacts at the records office. The father is listed as unknown, but there's an additional note that only appears in the internal records. What note? A request for a paternity test that was made at the time of birth but never completed because the interested party withdrew the process. Eleanor took the document, examining it carefully. Who requested the test? Robert Sterling, Arthur's cousin who worked at the cafe, the same Robert my father suspected was the child's father? Exactly. But there's more. Evan took another document from the folder. I gained access to Robert's private medical records through a discreet contact. He had a fertility test done shortly after requesting the paternity test. And the test revealed that Robert was sterile, a congenital condition that made it impossible for him to have biological children. Eleanor felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. So Robert can't be Chloe's father. Correct. And there's something more disturbing. Robert had known about his condition for years, since he was a teenager. Yet he let the suspicion fall on him when Clara became pregnant. But why? Evan hesitated before continuing, because he was protecting the child's real father, someone he loved and respected too much to expose. Who? Arthur, ma'am. The test Robert requested wasn't to prove he was the father, but to prove he wasn't, making it clear that it could only be his cousin. Eleanor stood up abruptly, walking to the window. Are you saying that Arthur is Chloe's father and Robert knew it? That's what the evidence indicates. Robert took the blame to protect Arthur's marriage, who had just married you, and Robert never told anyone the truth. Apparently not. He took the secret to his grave. Eleanor was silent for several minutes, processing the revelations. Everything began to make sense in a painful and clear way. Why Arthur had connected so quickly with Chloe, why he insisted on taking care of her despite the threats, why he had recognized Clara in Somerville. "Is there a way to confirm this definitively?" she asked finally. "Yes, a DNA test between Arthur and Chloe. But considering Arthur is also the father of the baby Clara is expecting, and that siblings share similar genetic material, the confirmation will be unequivocal." Eleanor sat down again, feeling the weight of 5 years of lies and secrets fall on her shoulders. Did Arthur know? When he found Chloe in the park, did he know she was his daughter? From my data, probably not consciously. But something in him must have recognized the connection. The paternal instinct doesn't lie. At that moment, Eleanor's phone rang. It was Pastor Michael, from the support group Arthur attended. "Mrs. Sterling, sorry to bother you, but your husband hasn't shown up for the last 2 meetings. I'm worried he started gambling again. Thank you for calling, Pastor. I'll check on the situation." After hanging up, Eleanor looked at Evan. "I need to talk to Arthur, alone, about all of this. Mom, may I suggest caution? These revelations are explosive. They could destroy more than they fix. Evan, my marriage is already destroyed. Now I need to decide if I'm going to try to save what's left of my dignity, or if I'm going to help build something honest on the rubble of our lies." An hour later, Eleanor was at the clinic where Clara was recovering. She found Arthur in the hallway, talking to a doctor about care during the pregnancy. "Arthur, I need to talk to you. Urgently." They went to a private waiting room where Eleanor placed the documents Evan had brought on the table. "Do you know what these papers are?" she asked. Arthur quickly examined the documents, his expression changing as he read. "Where did you get this?" "From the investigation I ordered into Chloe's paternity." "Robert was sterile, Arthur. He couldn't have children." "That's impossible." Robert said, "Robert lied to protect you. He took a blame that wasn't his to save his marriage to me." Arthur sat heavily in a chair, the weight of the revelation hitting him like a tsunami. "My God, Eleanor, if this is true, it is true. You are Chloe's father. You always have been. And deep down you always knew, didn't you?" Arthur covered his face with his hands. "I suspected. From the first moment I saw her, there was something familiar about her, something that touched me in a way I couldn't explain. And why did you never tell me about Clara? Why did you never tell me you had met her? Because I was afraid. Afraid you would find out I had betrayed our marriage before it even really began. Afraid of losing you, of losing everything. Arthur, our marriage ended years ago. We were just pretending it still existed. I know, and I hate myself for it. I hate myself for losing you to gambling, for lying, for not being the man you deserved." Eleanor sat next to her husband. "And I hate myself for becoming a bitter and controlling woman, for using money as a weapon, for threatening to destroy your life when you found happiness with Chloe." They were silent for a few minutes, processing years of pain and resentment. "What do we do now?" Arthur finally asked. "Now we tell the truth. To Chloe, to Clara, to everyone. No more secrets, no more lies. And us, our marriage?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "I think it's time we admit we lost each other a long time ago, that we tried to force something that wasn't working, and we ended up hurting everyone in the process. Eleanor, No," she interrupted. "Don't apologize anymore. We both made mistakes. We both hurt each other. But maybe there's still time to get at least one thing right." "What?" "Giving Chloe the family she deserves, even if it means admitting that our family is broken." At that moment, Chloe appeared in the hallway, coming from the infirmary where she had spent the afternoon with Clara. She ran to Arthur and Eleanor, her innocent face contrasting with the complexity of the adult situation. "Mr. Arthur, Aunt Eleanor, my mum is better today. She remembered more things about when I was a baby." Arthur looked at the girl he now knew was his daughter and felt an overwhelming emotion. "That's great, little one. I'm so happy your mom is getting better. Mister, can I ask you something? Of course you can ask anything. If my real dad showed up, would you still be my friend?" Chloe's innocent question broke Arthur's and Eleanor's hearts simultaneously. The child had no idea she was looking directly at her biological father. "Always," Arthur promised, his voice thick with emotion. "No matter what happens, I will always be your friend, and I will always take care of you." Chloe smiled and hugged Arthur tightly. "I love you, Mr. Arthur. You're the best person in the world." As he hugged the daughter he had rediscovered without knowing, Arthur made a decision that would change everything. It was time to stop running from the truth and start building a life based on honesty, even if it cost him everything he thought he wanted. 6 months had passed since the revelations that changed everyone's lives. It was a sunny June morning in Charleston, and Chloe was running through the garden of the new house where she now lived with Clara, Elsie, and little Gabriel, her 2-month-old brother, who slept peacefully in his crib near the window. The house had been bought by Arthur in a quiet neighborhood of the city, close enough for him to visit his 2 children daily, but far from the painful memories of the housing project where Chloe had grown up in poverty. Clara was in the kitchen preparing lunch, her complete physical and emotional recovery evident in the sparkle in her eyes and the loving way she cared for her children. The amnesia had completely disappeared, and with it came painful memories, but also the ability to forgive and rebuild. "Mom, is Daddy Arthur coming today?" asked Chloe, now 5, entering the kitchen with her hands dirty from the garden where she planted flowers with Elsie. "Yes, he is, my dear." He said, "He was bringing a surprise for you." Chloe beamed. The discovery that Arthur was her biological father had been revealed gradually, with the help of a child psychologist who guided them on the best way to explain the family's complexities to a child. For Chloe, who had always dreamed of having a father, the news was received with pure joy. She didn't fully understand the circumstances that led to the initial separation, but she understood that she now had a complete family and was loved unconditionally. The sound of the doorbell interrupted Clara's thoughts. It was Arthur, arriving earlier than usual, carrying a large box and a mysterious smile. "Surprise," he announced as Chloe ran to hug him. "What is it, Daddy? What is it?" Arthur placed the box on the floor and opened it carefully. Inside, there was a 2-month-old golden retriever puppy with a red ribbon tied around its neck. "A puppy!" Chloe shouted, ecstatic. "Is he mine?" "He's ours," Arthur corrected. "Yours, Gabriel's, Mommy's, and Grandma Elsie's, to protect our family." Clara watched the scene with emotion. In recent months, she had learned to love Arthur in a mature and true way, no longer based on mysteries or fantasies, but on the reality of an imperfect man who fought every day to be better. "What are you going to name him?" Clara asked, approaching to pet the puppy. "Hope," Chloe said without hesitation, "because Grandma always said we should never lose hope." Elsie came out of the laundry room upon hearing the conversation, wiping her hands on her apron. At 73, she had officially become the grandmother she had always pretended to be and could finally relax, knowing her family was protected and united. "Hope is a beautiful name," she approved, kissing her granddaughter's forehead. While Chloe played with the puppy in the garden, the adults sat on the porch to talk about future plans. It was a routine they had developed, regular meetings to discuss the children's education, family finances, and the next steps in their intertwined lives. "How are things at the company?" Clara asked. "Getting better," Arthur replied. "Eleanor officially took over the financial administration, and I focus on the operational side. We work well together now that we're no longer trying to be a couple." Arthur and Eleanor's divorce had been finalized 3 months ago in an amicable process that surprised everyone. Eleanor had discovered through therapy that her obsession with control and her bitterness came from the frustration of trying to force a love that had never been reciprocal. "And is she okay?" asked Elsie, who had developed a grudging respect for Eleanor after she formally apologized for her past threats. "She is. She started dating Dr. Henrique, that doctor who took care of Clara in Somerville. They met when she went to thank him for the medical care." "That's good," Clara said sincerely. "Eleanor deserves to be happy." At that moment, a familiar car pulled up in front of the house. It was Gerard making his weekly visit to the children. In recent months, the 84-year-old man had transformed into a kinder version of himself, dedicating time and resources to repairing the damage he had caused in the past. "Grandpa Gerard!" Chloe shouted, running to greet him. The relationship between them had blossomed naturally, based on the genuine affection he felt for the girl and his desire for redemption. "How's my favorite granddaughter?" he asked, picking her up. "I got a puppy. Want to see?" As Gerard was dragged by Chloe to meet Hope, Arthur took the opportunity to talk privately with Clara about something he had been planning for weeks. "Clara, there's something I want to ask you." "What is it?" Arthur took a small velvet box from his pocket, but didn't open it. "I know our story started with lies and confusion. I know I caused you a lot of suffering, and I know I'm still learning to be the man you and the children deserve." Clara's heart quickened, realizing where the conversation was going. "But I also know that I truly love you, and that I want to spend the rest of my life fixing my mistakes and building an honest family with you. Clara Santos, will you marry me?" He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring, very different from the extravagance that used to characterize his former life. Clara looked at Arthur, seeing in his eyes a sincerity that didn't exist when they met in Somerville. She also saw the man who played with Chloe every day, who woke up in the middle of the night to care for Gabriel, who had learned to be a father and a partner through trial and error. "Yes," she said finally, "but on one condition. Any condition. I want Chloe to be our flower girl, and I want Elsie to be the one who gives me away at the altar. They are the people who made it possible for us to get here." Arthur smiled, placing the ring on Clara's finger. It couldn't be any other way. Chloe, who had noticed the adult's movement, dropped Hope and ran to her parents. "Are you getting married? Will I have a princess dress?" "Yes, you will," Clara laughed, hugging her daughter, "and we're going to be an official family." "We're already a family," Chloe said with the innocent wisdom of children. "We always have been." As the family celebrated the engagement in the flowery garden of the house, Evan watched from a distance, satisfied with the happy ending he had helped build. He had become a close friend of the family, especially after Gerard officially hired him to organize a charity fund for vulnerable children. Pastor Michael arrived shortly after, bringing members of the support group for a special celebration. Arthur had completed 8 months without gambling, a personal record he celebrated religiously every week. "Brother Arthur," the pastor said, "God has truly transformed your story of destruction into a blessing." "It wasn't just God," Arthur replied, looking at his assembled family. "It was also a brave little girl who decided to help a stranger tied to a tree, a grandmother who dedicated her life to caring for a child who wasn't even hers, and people who chose to forgive instead of seeking revenge." As the sun set over Charleston, painting the sky with golden and pink hues, Chloe sat on Arthur's lap on the porch, Hope asleep at their feet, and Gabriel in Clara's arms. "Daddy," she said, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course, little one. Are you happy now?" Arthur looked around at his unconventional but deeply united family. Clara radiant with her engagement ring, Elsie knitting a sweater for Gabriel, Gerard telling stories to the guests, and his daughter in his arms, safe and loved. "Happier than I ever thought possible," he answered honestly. Me too, Chloe said, snuggling against her father's chest. I knew you were going to be my daddy from the first day I saw you. How did you know? Because you had kind eyes. And people with kind eyes always end up becoming family, as the stars began to appear. In the Charleston sky, the family that had been formed through unlikely circumstances continued their journey of love, forgiveness, and second chances. Because sometimes the most beautiful endings are born from the most painful beginnings, and the strongest families are those who choose to love despite all imperfections. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you so much.